Welcome, 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 everybody. I am here to talk about the conventions of academic writing. Now, this might sound a little intimidating. Um, Academic writing, what does that mean? It just means writing a more polished, a more flowing paper. All right. I know that a lot of us have been trained in ways of just kind of like, here's a question, I'm just going to answer it. And that requires that we do these really brief declarative sentences where it's like, this is what happened in the War of 1812. The War of 1812 was fought between the British and the Americans. They burned down the White House. It's like so boring. But you've been trained that way. So what this section is trying to get us to unlearn is how to get away from those little quick declarative sentences and start writing sentences that are a little bit more compound or complex sentences. Okay. I am absolutely not going to teach anyone grammar right now. The reading in this section for the conventions of academic writing, which I have condensed to the most important things that you need to say, please look at the grammar sections. Please look at the grammar sections. It will be a nice little refresher. But I actually think that most of the things that you will encounter in this section can be corrected by simply reading what you write out loud. If you write a paragraph or if you write a sentence and you hit period, and you read it out loud, you will hear what might be missing. Your brain moves so much quicker than your mouth, much quicker than your fingers, right? And you, as the person who is writing it, know exactly what you're trying to say. So when you type, and you look over what you typed and you read it in your head will make it make sense. Our brains are literally designed to do that. That's how we are, as biologically speaking, that's how we're made. Our brains will fix it. But if you read it out loud, you'll be like, oh, there is something missing. There's a verb missing. This doesn't make sense. This is an incomplete or fragmentary sentence. If you stop, slow down, and read it out loud, you will catch these things. I absolutely recommend doing this. I do this when I write. A lot of my friends who are published writers, they do the same thing. Listen to the things that you're typing and see how they sound to your ears, because once you can hear them, then that apparatus from brain to mouth to ear is like, oh, there's a problem. Okay, so I'm not going to teach you grammar, right? But I do really want everyone to make sure that you pay attention to the sections in the reading that have to do with comma splices. That's a big thing. People just throwing commas in. I have no idea why that happens, but if you actually read things out loud, and when you read things out loud, you pause when there's a comma and you pause a little bit longer when there's a period, you'll hear how choppy that might sound. So pay attention to the comma splices. That will really help if you read everything out loud. Pay attention also to tenses. If you're writing, you should always, in academic writing, be writing in the present tense. The argument that you're making is an argument that you are making right now. Everything is in the present tense. If your quote is in the past tense or doesn't work with the present tense, then you need to integrate your quotes better. And that's in the last section. It shows us how to do the integrations. If this is confusing, please contact me and we can talk about it, okay? So everything's always in the present tense. And if you need to fix your quotes, fix them so that they fix into the present tense. You can use the brackets. That's what MLA format allows us to do. I'm going to take a little pause right now. When it comes to quoting and using MLA, to fix the tenses or to take out a section of a quote, or to even start a quote. Brackets are very helpful, and there are certain things that we need to avoid as far as the conventions of academic writing are concerned. When you quote something directly, you don't have to quote it from the beginning of the sentence that the quote is. You literally are quoting exactly when you need to quote. That's what the quotation marks are for, the little bunny ears, right? I remember that from second grade, the bunny ears. When you have the bunny ears, that says this is a quote, this is from somebody else. And then you give them the credit at the end of the sentence. You don't need to start your quote at the beginning of the sentence that the quote starts. You don't need to do that. You need to quote where you need to quote, and you need your sentence to flow with it. This is a convention of academic writing. Everything needs to flow together, and if you can't hear it flow, you should read it out loud so you can hear it. But don't quote 4 lines when all you really need are 1. That doesn't show me that you're actually reading. It shows me that you're filling up space, and that's not very helpful. You use the quotes the way that you need to, and the quotation marks do that. Now, I have seen students in the past who have started a quote after the quotation. So quotation mark, ... the words. They get through the quote and they go ... end quotation mark. Those ... dots at the beginning and end of the quote, never do that. Never, ever do that. You don't need them. You know why? Because the ellipse, those ... dots show that there's something there. But you don't need to show that there's something there. Your quotation marks tell your reader that you're picking up a quote from somebody else. That's what's important about the quotation marks. That's why they're very important. You don't need that ellipsis, that ... at the beginning or end of your quotes. So if I see that, I will make a feedback comment about it. You do not need those. When do you use the ellipses? Well, let's say that you found a really great quote from David Foster Wallace, but it's really kind of long. It's like 3 lines long. And the important stuff is like the first bunch of the quote. And there's some weird stuff in the middle that kind of like addresses the beginning part, but it's not really important. So the beginning is great. The middle is not great. And then the last part is also like that punch, that oomph. Like, so you need the beginning and you need the end. What you do is, in the flow of your own sentence, you would introduce and integrate your quote using the quotation marks and not an ellipsis at the beginning of your quote. And you'd start that quote with the cool stuff at the beginning of that quote that you need, that you found. And then you get to the point that you don't need this stuff anymore. You use the bracket, not the parentheses, not the little squiggly weird one, the one that looks like a staple, like the half, like a little bit of a rectangle, right? You open it up, ... close it with the other half of the rectangle. And then you start back where the quote that you really need it to be is, okay? That bracket and the ... illustrates that you, as the writer of this paper, included a gap, right? So those ellipses, the ... dots at the beginning and end of a sentence, never need them. But if you take something out, you need to put brackets and put the ... The brackets, ... close brackets, show that you've taken something out. And that really helps with the flow. Academic writing is about using the things that you need and not using things that you don't need, okay? And those little brackets really help. So I never want to see ... at the beginning of a quote or at the end of a quote. Both, neither, ever. What I also need to make sure is that your sentence flows completely. So your words, open quote, the quote, And if you need to take something out of the middle and show that, then you use the brackets with the ellipses and close the brackets and finish it, quote, and then you finish your sentence. Don't use a period yet. That's when you open the parentheses, use the last name of the author, and in your case, the paragraph number that you found that quote. Okay, and then you close that parentheses and then you put the period. That's how you do it. Never do it at the end of the, never give the citation at the end of the quote. It's the end of your sentence, not the quote. It's the end of your sentence, and the period goes on the outside of the parentheses after you do the citation. Now, this is a lot. I'm pretty sure that most of you have already encountered MLA, but I just want to make sure that you follow the academic conventions here. All right. So we talked about the ellipses and what to do, make sure that everything flows. And we want to make sure that your sentences are actually complex and compound. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you all something. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this thing here. It's so incredibly helpful. This is a sample of writing by a guy named Gary Provost. And he has this thing. It says, this sentence has 5 words, period. Here are 5 more words, period. 5-word sentences are fine, period. But several together become monotonous, period. Listen to what is happening, period. The writing is getting boring, period. The sound of it drones, period. It's like a stuffed record, period. The eardrum demands variety, period. Oh my God, that's so boring. So you see that whole paragraph there at the beginning with the 5-word sentences. This is what I call machine gun fire sentences. Brr, brr, brr. Words, 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 period. Words, 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 period. Words, 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 period. That's so boring. It sounds like you're listing things. It's not like you're writing a paper. It's just that you're throwing a bunch of things out there. And that gets boring to your reader. And it actually doesn't communicate the ideas that you need to communicate very effectively. And what is good academic writing at the college level is being able to effectively communicate your ideas in writing. Now, what I want you to pay attention to here is see all the different colors. You see that one bunch of machine gun sentences at the top there. It's all blocked. So the color shows you that it's all monotonous. Then you get to the next paragraph and the colors are very different. Then you go down there, you see everything is different. Now listen, period. I vary the sentence length, comma, and I create music, period. Music, period. The writing sings, period. It has a pleasant rhythm, comma, a lilt, comma, a harmony, period. I use short sentences, period. I use sentences of medium length, period. And sometimes when I am certain the reader is rested, comma, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, comma, a sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus and crescendo, comma, the roll of drums, comma, the crash of cymbals, dash. Sounds that say, listen to this, comma, it is important. What I'm asking everybody to do, especially with reading things out loud, when you read things out loud, the argument becomes clearer. You can see if you're making mistakes with your grammar, with it being incomplete or fragmentary sentences. You can just simply hear them. But you can also hear this musicality of the way that language works. Right? I know that this isn't in the handbook section, but that's why I told everybody, watch the video. This is some good stuff. Organizationally and stylistically, everybody at the college level needs writing that is not boring. Yes, use a 5-word sentence here and there. Yes, of course, you need to do that. But sometimes you only need like 3 words. Sometimes you need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. Well punctuated. And you can figure that out when you read things out loud. This is very helpful in getting everybody to understand that Writing is a discipline. The more you do it, the better you get at it. The more you read, the more you see that other people are doing things, it gets easier, right? But I want to make sure that we are all aware that sometimes we just shoot out those machine gun bursts of sentences, and that's just bad writing, right? I'm not saying you're going to get a bad grade because of it, but I'm literally warning everybody. Don't do machine gun sentences. They're boring, they're terrible, and they don't communicate as effectively as varying up your sentences. Now, the parallel structure, the grammar, all of that stuff that you can see in the handout from the handbook, all of that stuff about conventional writing still works here. These aren't bad sentences. These are great sentences. They're punctuated well. They are grammatically correct. But it's up to us to really pay attention to how we're writing. Okay. So I want everyone to slow down, just like I said when it came to the reading. Slow down, take your time. When you write a couple of sentences, pause, read them out loud the way I did. Now listen, period. I varied the sentence length, comma, and I create music, period. Read the punctuation. You will hear how your sentences flow or how they get choppy, right? So this is very important information when it comes to putting together your actual body paragraphs as well as the paper in total. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. So that's really important. So machine gun sentences are things that we need to avoid, right? What we also need to avoid is what is called meta commentary. Meta commentary. Meta commentary is talking about what we're going to do, right? I have seen so many papers in my day. I've seen so many assignments that have said, what I'm going to do in this paper is this. And so I'm going to do this right now. And here's me doing it, right? Those 3 sentences could just be one sentence. You don't need to tell me that you're going to tell me that you're going to do something. You just need to do it. It needs to flow. You don't need to explain what you're going to do. You just need to do it. Meta commentary is talking about something. And I want us to all be aware of this and avoid it. Here's an example that I see. It's not a great example, but I think that you will all pick up on it, especially if we really understand what the 3 I's offer us: the introducing, integration, and the interpretation of actual quotes, right? There's been several times where I've seen papers that introduce a quote like this. I read a really great quote about this topic. This topic is talked about in the quote by David Foster Wallace. David Foster Wallace says, quote, that's so boring. That's so terrible. Those first 2 sentences don't even matter. They're talking about something that someone's talking about. It's just terrible. It's boring. And I know that if you had to read a paper about that, you would pick up on this like, oh my God, why are they telling? This is redundant. So I want us to all be aware of meta commentary, talking about, right? So you don't need to say, I have a quote that is really great. The quote talks about this stuff. The quote is this. You don't need to do that. Just make sure that you try to make sure that your sentences flow. I don't want to sound like a hippie, right? I don't want to sound like a weird hippie guy where it's like everything flows and stuff and everything doesn't matter. No, things matter, right? Words are important. And the way that we use words is really important. And the conventions of academic writing, when I was in your situation, I needed to figure out how to convincingly communicate and being able to be aware of those really short declarative sentences, those machine gun sentences. If you do that too much or even at all, your communication is broken down. If you talking about doing something, that means that your paragraph, which should really only be half a page long, is a full page long because you're talking about things too much. You don't need to do that, right? So academic writing is about being concise and direct. That doesn't mean that you're being a jerk. It doesn't mean that you're being rude. It just means that I have something to say and here it is. And you need to follow along with me in my very well put together sentences that flow beautifully and it sounds good to your ears. So read everything out loud. Make sure that you read everything out loud. Make sure that you try to avoid those machine gun sentences. Make sure that your writing has music, as Gary Provost was talking about. Make sure that you're not saying you're going to do something that you're going to do. Make sure that you just do it. Get to the point. In a paper that you're going to have, it's going to be like 4 to 5 pages. You don't have time to waste on that. You have great ideas. You need to communicate those great ideas. Don't waste your time. Okay? So the conventions of academic writing, all of the really good stuff is here in the reading. Okay? I just gave you a few different things that are not in the reading, which are very important, and I really want to see you implement them. What I also absolutely need to make sure that you do is when you quote, don't have the ellipses at the beginning and the end. If you need to take a gap out, then you use the brackets and the ellipses. Your quotation marks dictate your quote. Your reader is smart. They don't need to start at the beginning of the sentence to know that this quote came in the midst of a sentence. What you need to do is make whatever you start your quoting to fit the flow of your sentence. And finally, you need to cite. You need to cite. Make sure that you cite. And that citation, that parenthetical citation with the last name, comma, paragraph number, that goes at the end of your sentence, not the end of the quote, the end of the sentence, with a period after the parentheses. Okay? No period before, no period on the inside of the quote, because the quote is part of your sentence. And if it's part of your sentence and you punctuate it, then it's bad. It's not good. Period at the end. And finally, here's one thing that I have noticed that students do an awful lot. I'm not saying any of you do it, but I notice it a lot. David Foster Wallace is known as David to his parents and to his friends. You don't know, he's been dead for 15 years. I'm just saying. You don't know him. You don't know Garnet Cottigan. Academic writing requires that you introduce their full name the first time that we see them. So in your introductory paragraph, yeah, David Foster Wallace is This is Water, discusses these ideas, right? That's what you do. And then maybe when you get into a body paragraph and you introduce the quote, maybe you say David Foster Wallace the first time. But you never, ever, ever call him David. And for some reason I see, like, why would you call him Wallace? Wallace was a character on the first season of The Wire. Wallace is not the person that you're talking about. David Wallace, also not who you're talking about. You're talking about, or Foster. Jesus, Harry Christmas. Wallace is who you talk about. I'm only human. Billy Joel. Yes, Wallace, David Foster Wallace. Last name, Foster, middle name. You would never quote anyone that way. And since you don't know David, you never call him David. David Foster Wallace to introduce the text in your introduction, and maybe somewhere in the middle of your paragraphs where, you know, like we haven't talked about him in a minute. David Foster Wallace notes, that's good. But never call him David, and certainly never call him Foster. Wallace argues in his article, Wallace argues, Wallace notes, Wallace defends this by stating, Wallace, 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 okay? So think of the character from The Wire, first season. Wallace is who you're talking about. Wallace, the last name. We want to talk about that. Garnet Cottigan. Garnet Cottigan's article, or essay rather, Walking While Black, discusses all of these different ideas. Move down to your next paragraph. Cottigan argues. Cottigan writes. Cottigan notes. According to Cottigan. See what I'm saying? That's the kind of stuff that you want to do. Never Garnet never said anything. Cottigan did, right? Okay, so I want everyone to keep that stuff in mind when it comes to actually writing out your stuff. And finally, this isn't as hard as it sounds. The more and more you do it, the easier and easier it is. You've done some reading, you got some great examples, you got some great vocabulary, use it. You see how the quoting works from weeks 1 and 2. You're making connections according to all the stuff that you're doing from weeks 1 and 2. When it comes to writing, follow the formulas, fit it, 3 I's, but make sure that you avoid machine gun sentences. Make sure that you avoid meta commentary. Make sure that your quotes look kind of cool as opposed to using all that extra stuff that you don't need. And make sure that you talk about these people with the formal respect that they deserve. David Foster Wallace wrote a really wonderful speech, but Wallace contends, Wallace argues, Wallace does this. And here's a little gem. Neither Wallace nor Cottigan say anything. So when you're writing at the academic level, this academic college level writing, none of them say anything because you didn't hear them say it. You read it. So they argue, sure. They note, awesome. They write, great. They might contend, they might posit, they might do all of these things, but they never said this. They don't say that. They write, they argue, they contend, they do all of those things, right? So keep this stuff in mind, all right? This has gone on long enough. I hope it's helped. If not, contact me and we can go over it even more if you need it. So smart people, do the reading, watch the video, questions or concerns, you know how to get a hold of me. Now go do what it is you do.